Welcome to our Sharing Circle group podcast number 2. My name is David. We have 4 people around the table for today's group dialogue, plus a few others in the room. Our dialogue format is the same as podcast number 1. Each person brings along a question for the group to explore. And let me thank everyone who emailed an appreciation of our first podcast recording. Now we begin today's group dialogue with a question from Jyoti.
Hi everybody, it's grateful to be on this podcast invited by David. My name is Jyoti. I work as an engineer and also a coach hosting the Illuminating Dialogues podcast series. And my question for today is, how do you experience presence?
Probably the presence is reflected in the body. So if you feel the energy in your hands, it can be the energy of presence reflected into the hands, the energy of presence reflected into the ankles. It is possible to experience it out with the body, but most people begin by experiencing presence in the body. I remember there was an interview between a scientist called David Baum and Krishnamurti. And after David had finished the dialogue, which was more than an hour, he said when he left the building, he could feel space. He could feel the presence of the space around him. It has a kind of a mystical quality that you can only know by experience. But in some sense, its experience is a limited. You're really experiencing that which underlies it, experience. But you can sense it in the body, a reflection of presence in the body.
Yes. This is Bernard speaking. I think I spoke last time as well. For me, it's also about a sense of stillness and a sense of silence, but with a very clear sense of connection, the inner and the outer. And for me, if I'm able to find that space, then I can come out with words and other things, but that's at the bottom of it. But I think for me it's very much, as David says, within the body, and it's a silence and a stillness, but there's a total alertness and connection, but without the mind jabber. So it's seeing without naming and listening, hearing without naming. So I think that's what it is for me, really.
Hello, I'm Anne. I have never been part of a podcast. I'm so pleased to be here with these lovely people. Thank you. For me, presence is, as you've both, is beyond, it's experiential, it's beyond, it just is. I think for me, it's actually beyond awareness of it. I know I really, really like it. Sometimes it doesn't last for long, but when it's there, it's beautiful.
I'd just like to add a little bit to your question. I was in a cathedral in Edinburgh 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was the only person in the cathedral. So you have a beautiful building designed to create an atmosphere of silence. And to be seated there in that building, you can very much sense presence. There's the most beautiful sermon. It's great to hear a sermon that's not just conceptual. So presence is something that's sensed in the absence of thought activity. can be quite strong. I'd like to ask Anne if she has a question, and we'll take it from there.
My question is, enlightenment is a big word. Does it mean the spaciousness of being aware always of the present moment? Present moment awareness.
So, I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer, but when I listen to people who seem to be more enlightened than I am, I definitely feel that there is a deeper sense of awareness that can pierce through my mind. There's a huge degree of spaciousness and almost a unfolding of all the life processes. So they're able to be aware at such a deep level of the mind activity, of the body activity, and it helps me be more in tune with my own being. So I'm not sure if there is a end goal, but for me, I just feel like it's a process of evolution, of just becoming more aware of whatever is happening in the experience of the present moment.
I liked what one of the Buddhist sayings when they asked the Buddha, "Are you fully enlightened?" And the reply was, "When the world is free of suffering, then I'm fully enlightened." That resonates for me. And I agree with Jyoti, you can sense someone speaking beyond your capacity to be free of the ego. You can sense the quality of that energy, and you can also sense that is within you also. I think that's probably the original meaning of faith. It's not about believing in a story. The people who met Buddha or Jesus, they could sense something behind the words, and that something was also within them. But I agree with Jyoti's original statement. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer this question.
Well, I know I'm not qualified to answer this question. And I like what Jyoti says very much, and David. And very much it's, of course, we use words, and we all know that words are not the thing. Words are just the pointers, and they mean different things to different people, like gurus and icons, and what do you actually mean? And maybe one has to be, maybe there has to be enlightenment. I'm not going to say one, because that immediately starts to identify with ego. Maybe there has to be enlightenment inside in order to recognize it in somebody else. I don't think it's like you can never know you're a guru, but other people can attribute guru-ness to you. But as soon as you think you're the guru, then the ego comes in, and there's that distance. And I think enlightenment, what or who is it that gets enlightened? Because it's not the ego. So can you actually say anything about it?
I'll bring in another little topic. I'm trying to avoid going down the negative route, because you only need to look at the news of what's going on in the world for that one. But I have noticed that any group that has a powerful spiritual teacher or leader, when the leader dies, the groups tend to crystallize in some way. They become defensive of the teaching at the expense of exploring or even finding the living experience that the teacher is trying to convey. I can see this in diversity of groups. I see it in the Steiner schools, the Montessori schools, the Krishnamurti schools. I like the Carl Jung. The last 5 years of his life, he pointed out that the people who were actually following and supporting him were doing more damage to his teaching than the people who were critical. And one of his favourite sayings was, "Thank God I'm not a Jungian therapist." So there seems to be that quality of the teaching crystallising and people with good intention defending the teacher at the expense of exploring and discovery. So I think one of the positives that's come out of the podcast interviews is this diversity of people in the room, people who are interested in Francis Lucille's teachings, Paul Selig, Krishnamurti, Eckhart Tolle, Sufi teachings, Vedanta, all in the one room. And at least for an hour and a half, we're not competing or battling against one another. So there's something to be said for a teaching that shows the truth exists in all these diversity of teachings. Each person will have their favourite teaching. I think the poet Rumi explains it well. He invites these people from a diversity of religious backgrounds to a banquet, and when he comes down the stairs, everybody's arguing with one another. And he points to the light on the wall, the trees reflected in the wall, and the light. Each wall has a different pattern, but it's the same light behind each pattern. So I'd be interested to hear people's views on that topic.
Yes, I see that very clearly, that it's in some ways the naming of the experience and it's the beliefs that get in the way. I think if you don't have to have a belief in something if you actually know it experientially. And I think that's what often happens with organized religions. There's a lot of dogma, there's a lot of teaching, and because they're rooted in the duality, there'll be a lot of fighting. And which is why personally I always go for the esoteric side of all religions, really, because for me it's important that there isn't a lot of dogma. There's not much that comes between me and my relationship with the ultimate, whatever it is. And you can see it getting worse and worse, really. I mean, just recently I've been reading a few things about Christian nationalism in the States, which seems to me an absolute travesty of adapting, what is, in many ways, in a wonderful way of being in the world, to fit your politics and your nationalistic tendencies, it seems. And I think that's where we're going wrong, really.
What Bernard says is very, very manifest today, 8th of December 2024. But I think it's always historically been thus, in a way, if we really look back. A young person once said to me, there are only really two big things. One is love, which I think she meant in the true sense of love and acceptance and non-judgment and embracing, and fear. And my granddaughter, who's 20, we were discussing almost what you're saying. And she said, but we are just nature itself. And we just we hang all our fears, all our anxiety. I think young people, you're talking about evolution, I think they're aware in a different way from most of us. And I thought that's what we are. That's what we are. We're just life expressing itself. We could be a flower or a leaf or a human being, but it's our inability to, in a way, I think, overcome our fear, our anxiety. The survival gene is the most powerful, the survival instinct, the most important, the most powerful thing we have. And I think all of the great, great, great teachers have taught us, they're trying to teach us just to let go. Just to let go.
And could you do me a favour? Could you repeat the trying to teach us just to let go, just because there's a desire there. Thanks.
I think they are all the great teachers, from all the great teachers, just let go. Just let go. And be in the moment. I also want to add that we all have an inner teacher. We all have it. Every 8 billion of us. And when we let go, I think we get in touch with it.
I often felt about trying to be present and being like nature, like you said, Anne. And I feel like you said about the Christian nationalism, and I was doing this as I going deeper into my own background, as people seem to want to defend certain thought forms or their skin color or their body, and they're identified with the material realm. But on the other hand, I do see like there's an importance in the material realm, because like nature, like a rose is very beautiful, but it also has thorns. So in a way that there's a part of creation, and it depends on the season of your life, that the intensity of presence may require some sort of more intense aspects of ourselves to show as well. Well, that might not be from the ego. It's still a certain intensity of presence that expresses, and you can see that in nature as well.
We're going to have a poem from Bernard, but before we have the poem, I wonder if Jyoti could say a few words about his own podcast, which I think would be worth hearing.
Thank you, David. And my podcast actually came from an inner, I think Eckhart Tolle says this as well, that a creative aspect or creative force, it just manifests itself inside, and it doesn't really come from anywhere, but it's almost like a feeling or an emotion. And I had been carrying this for a long time, and one day 2 years ago I just did my first kind of podcast, and I call it illuminating dialogues, because illuminating, it's, you don't really know what's going to happen at the end of the podcast, and I hope for an illumination. And a dialogue, it's really a flow of meaning where people come together and they perhaps go to a place that they've never been to before, and in the process hopefully illuminate both the speakers and the listeners. And the sum of the parts are often greater than the parts themselves. So my hope is from my podcast is inviting people on from different cultures, from different backgrounds, and sharing that deeper wisdom and presence, and hopefully untangle some belief systems along the way, and of course, have fun.
This is just a little poem by Steve Taylor. I love the days of doing nothing in particular, when the hard black lines of schedules fade away, leaving an empty white page, and time stops hovering over us, pointing and shouting directions. I love the days of not deciding anything in advance, or not deciding anything at all, depending on the nature of each unknowable, unfolding moment. I love the days of not caring about being productive, which turn out to be the most productive of all. I love the days of not needing to be anywhere except here. I love the empty days of doing nothing that become gloriously full of being.
Thank you, Bernard. We've been requested to continue doing book recommendations, so by pure chance, the book is written by Steve Taylor. It's called The Clear Light. It's a hardcover book of poetic reflections with an introduction by Eckhart Tolle. And Eckhart suggests that this is a good book to keep by your bedside. Read a few pages each day. It can help to restore your inner stability. I've got a couple of short quotes from the book. The first one, with empathy, each person is a mysterious spiritual space. And the second quote, there is no need for the past to shadow us when we are always free in the clear light of the present. I'll just repeat the book title, The Clear Light by Steve Taylor. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for coming today. Everybody's volunteered to be here. It was extremely interesting to hear about Jyoti's podcast. And Bernard reads these poems extremely well. Watch the eagle. Best wishes to everybody.